Welcome to this deep dive. Okay, let's unpack this. We usually think of our bodies as these, incredibly precise, self-contained biological clocks.
Right, especially when we're talking about reproductive aging.
Exactly. For the longest time, there's just been this fundamental assumption that the timing of menopause is hardwired into your genetics,
Yeah, it's treated like this ticking metronome, counting down your reproductive years,
and that it's perfectly insulated and protected from the outside world.
which is a really comforting thought, honestly.
It totally is.
I mean, the idea that our internal timeline is sealed off in a vault somewhere gives us this sense of predictability. We've historically just viewed the onset of menopause as purely a matter of maternal inheritance and, well, the natural progression of age.
But the stack of research we are looking at today paints a much, much more complicated picture for you. We've pulled insights from a really diverse array of sources: epidemiological studies from WashU Medicine, official statements from the Endocrine Society, clinical literature from Life Extension, and Vibrant Wellness.
Plus, some incredibly detailed biochemical reviews from Frontiers journals.
Yeah, and piecing all this together, they point to a pretty unsettling reality, which is that this biological vault isn't actually sealed.
Not at all. The environment you live in, the materials you touch, the air you breathe, the food you consume, it's all constantly interacting with your biology.
Right.
These external factors can seep in and actively tamper with the gears of that biological clock.
Which brings us right to our core mission for this deep dive. We are tackling a question that feels incredibly relevant to anyone interested in reproductive health or longevity or just environmental science in general.
Absolutely.
Can prolonged everyday environmental exposure to endocrine-disrupting chemicals, EDCs, cause an unusually abrupt onset of menopausal symptoms?
It's a huge question.
It is. So we want to uncover how these invisible chemicals operate on a cellular level, look at what the massive human data sets actually say about early menopause, and, most importantly, figure out how you can protect your own biological timeline without feeling completely overwhelmed.
And feeling overwhelmed is usually the default response when we start talking about environmental toxicity. It's a lot.
Oh, totally. You feel like you can't touch anything.
Right. But understanding the exact mechanism, like how these compounds physically interact with your body's existing hormonal infrastructure, that is the very first step to taking back control of your health.
So let's start by breaking down that infrastructure and the chemicals that are hacking it. When we talk about EDCs, we are talking about synthetic chemicals found in totally mundane, everyday items.
Yeah, things you wouldn't even think twice about.
Right, like food packaging, cosmetics, your drinking water, thermal receipt paper, even nonstick pans. You've probably heard the acronyms thrown around in the news, like BPA, PCBs, and PFAS.
And we should probably clarify what those actually are, because they aren't just, abstract letters.
Please do.
So BPA is bisphenol A, which is primarily used to make certain plastics and resins like the lining of canned foods. And PCDs are polychlorinated biphenols, which were used heavily in industrial coolants and electrical equipment. And even though they were banned decades ago, they don't easily break down, so they actually still contaminate our soil and water today.
Wow, so they just stick around.
Exactly. And then PFAS stands for per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Those are the really famous forever chemicals used in water-resistant clothing and non-stick cookware.
So they are literally everywhere, ubiquitous. But reading through the mechanisms mapped out in the research, specifically from those Frontiers reviews, the way they threaten the reproductive timeline comes down to how they infiltrate your cellular signaling pathways.
Yes, exactly.
The text says they act as either agonists or antagonists. And I was trying to visualize this, and it made me think of a highly secure Wi-Fi network.
Okay, I like where this is going.
So your endocrine system is the network, right? And your natural hormones are the authorized users who are logging in with the correct passwords to send important messages.
That structural analogy works beautifully for this.
Awesome. So if EDCs are hackers, the agonists, specifically xenoestrogens, which are chemicals that structurally mimic natural estrogen, are the hackers who have basically stolen your password.
Right.
Because a molecule like BPA is shaped so similarly to your natural estradiol, it fits perfectly into your estrogen receptors. It logs into the network and just starts sending fake messages, tricking your cells into acting as if they are receiving real estrogen.
And then on the flip side of that mechanism, you have the antagonists.
The other type of hacker.
Exactly. Those are the hackers who don't just send fake messages, they change the password entirely.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they bind to the receptor, but they don't activate it. They simply sit there, blocking the real authorized user, your natural hormones, from getting into the network to do their vital jobs.
What's fascinating here is the sheer scale of the disruption this hacking causes. I mean, it doesn't just affect one single cell, it throws off the entire master control loop between your brain and your ovaries.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how it cascades. In the literature, this is called the hypothalamic pituitary gonadal axis, or the HPG axis for short.
The HPG axis, right?
When you have these chemical imposters just flooding the network,
Yeah.
the brain and the ovaries stop communicating effectively.
It's a complete communication breakdown.
Exactly. You might end up in a state of estrogen dominance, where the xenoestrogens create this artificial toxic excess of estrogenic activity.
Or I guess the opposite, right?
Right. If the receptors are blocked by antagonists, you experience a sudden, severe drop in hormonal function instead.
Which perfectly sets the stage for the timeline shift we mentioned, because understanding how they manipulate the network is one thing, but we need to look at the tangible, real-world data for you.
We need to see what's actually happening to people.
Exactly. Do these chemical hackers actually force the body to shut down its reproductive capacity earlier? And the WashU medicine study in our stack really hammered this home for me.
Yeah, that study is a heavy hitter.
It is. They didn't just look at a handful of lab mice. They did a massive secondary analysis of the U.S. National Health and Nutrition Examination Survey. They looked at the blood and urine of 5,700 women.
That is a massive sample size.
Right. And the lead author, who is a reproductive endocrinology subspecialist, found a glaring pattern. The women with the highest concentrations of those PCBs and phthalates in their system went through menopause an average of 2.5 years earlier than the national average.
Which is typically around age 51.
Yeah, 51. So they were hitting it at like 48 or 49.
And the Endocrine Society's findings on the SWAN study corroborate that WashU data almost perfectly.
Oh, right, the SWAN study.
Yeah, the SWAN study is a massive deal in reproductive science.
Yeah.
It was a 17-year prospective cohort study that meticulously tracked over 1,100 midlife women.
17 years is a long time to track people.
It's incredible data, and they found that the women with high levels of PFAS, those forever chemicals, reached menopause roughly 2 years earlier than the women with lower baseline levels.
Okay, I have to pause here and challenge this on behalf of the listener, because reading those numbers initially, my reaction was, well, so what?
That's a fair reaction.
Right, because going through menopause at 49 instead of 51 doesn't exactly sound like a catastrophic, life-altering shift. To the average person, a 2 to 2.5 year shift might just sound like, I don't know, a mild inconvenience.
Sure.
So why is this specific margin such a big deal medically?
Connecting this to the bigger picture of human longevity changes the perspective entirely. Menopause is not merely the cessation of fertility. It is a massive systemic and metabolic shift.
Okay, how so?
Well, estrogen is an incredibly potent protective hormone for your brain, your cardiovascular system, and your skeletal structure.
Oh, so it's doing a lot more than just regulating a cycle.
Exactly. When a woman loses that systemic protection prematurely, the mortality risks skyrocket. The WashU research highlights that early menopause is statistically linked to severe long-term health risks.
Like what kind of risks?
We're talking about a significantly increased incidence of fatal brain hemorrhages, coronary heart disease, strokes, and a rapid, dangerous loss of bone density.
Wow. So it's not just about a woman's period stopping a little early. It's about being stripped of a neurological and cardiovascular shield years before her body was genetically programmed to lose it.
Right, and the physical reality in the ovaries is where this gets even more concrete. The Frontiers studies discuss conditions like premature ovarian insufficiency, or POI, and diminished ovarian reserve.
And that has to do with the eggs themselves, right?
Yes. A female is born with a finite, non-renewable pool of what are called primordial follicles.
Primordial follicle.
You could think of them as dormant egg cells, surrounded by a protective layer of support cells. That is her absolute lifetime supply.
No making more later.
Exactly. And the epidemiological data suggests that chronic EDC exposure physically accelerates the death of these follicles. Once that non-renewable pool is depleted, it cannot be regenerated.
Which brings us to the core of our mission today, because a shifted timeline is a major revelation. But what makes this research so critical for you to understand is the abruptness.
The severity of it, yes.
The severity of the symptoms.
All right.
A major question we set out to answer is why EDC-induced menopause feels less like a gentle biological transition and more like, frankly, hitting a brick wall.
We really have to contrast a natural hormonal decline with a toxic disruption.
Right, because they're fundamentally different.
Completely. In a genetically timed natural menopause, the ovaries gradually, over the course of years, slow down their production of estrogen and progesterone.
It's a slope, not a cliff.
Exactly. The brain has time to adjust to the shifting environment. But with chronic EDC exposure, we return to that concept of hormonal chaos.
And the xenoestrogens are driving a lot of that chaos, right? Because the clinical literature from Vibrant Wellness is really clear on this. When you have synthetic chemicals mimicking estrogen, the hormonal fluctuations are not gradual.
No, they are violent and erratic.
Which makes sense. This intensifying of what doctors call vasomotor symptoms is exactly what leads to those severe, debilitating hot flashes and night sweats. It's the unpredictability of the chemical signaling.
But estrogen is really only half the story. The research shows severe targeted disruption to progesterone too.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, certain ubiquitous chemicals like the agricultural herbicide atrazine can actively inhibit the body's ability to produce progesterone or block its receptors entirely.
And progesterone acts as the body's primary calming, stabilizing hormone, doesn't it?
Yes, it's essential for that.
So if an environmental chemical is wiping out those calming effects, a person is left entirely exposed to heightened cortisol, severe insomnia, and a high baseline of anxiety.
Precisely. And if we look at the Endocrine Society's paper on the hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis and brain aging, we see the neurological fallout of this abruptness.
The brain is trying to compensate.
Yes. Because the ovaries aren't communicating properly with the brain due to the chemical interference, the brain starts effectively shouting.
Like it's turning up the volume to get a response.
Right. It pumps out massive concentrations of FSH and LH follicle-stimulating hormone and luteinizing hormone,
Yeah.
just desperately trying to get the ovaries to respond.
Which is exhausting for the body.
It is. These artificially high, chaotic levels of brain hormones are directly linked to cognitive dysregulation, severe brain fog, and potentially even neurodegenerative states later in life.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Think about this as a symphony orchestra. A natural, genetically timed menopause is like the conductor gently signaling the brass and the string sections to lower their volume over several measures, right?
Oh, I love this analogy.
Yeah, they just lower the volume until the music fades to a peaceful silence. It's coordinated. But in EDC-induced menopause, it's like someone kicking the conductor off the stage mid-performance.
Just total panic.
Exactly. You randomly cut the power to half the instruments, and you turn the percussion section up to maximum volume. The entire system experiences chaos and shock.
That orchestra analogy perfectly aligns with what the clinical data notes about medically induced menopause.
Oh, like from surgeries and things.
Yeah, as noted in the life extension source, when women have their ovaries surgically removed or undergo toxic treatments like chemotherapy, the onset of estrogen deficiency is sudden.
It's immediate.
Right, and the clinical symptoms are notoriously severe, vastly more severe than a natural menopause.
Because the body has zero time to adapt.
Exactly. EDC-induced follicular depletion mimics this sudden crash. The chemicals are rapidly destroying the ovarian reserve behind the scenes, creating an abrupt, violent onset of symptoms rather than a natural gradual fade.
So we've painted a pretty intense picture here for you. We've got the cellular hacking, the loss of protective hormones, the symptom whiplash. But to be genuinely well-informed, we have to look at the entire landscape.
Which means looking at the dissenting evidence in our stack.
Exactly. Because not all scientists agree that everyday chemical exposure is the main villain in reproductive aging.
Science is rarely a monolith, Ignoring the counterarguments does a massive disservice to the complexity of toxicology.
I completely agree. So there is a text excerpt in our research specifically titled Endocrine Disruptors that lays out the skeptic's case. It states clearly that some researchers argue the existing epidemiological data is, well, insufficient.
They want more proof.
Right. They propose that you cannot definitively prove a direct causal relationship between a general population's everyday exposure to industrial chemicals and these massive adverse endocrine effects.
And their primary argument centers on scale and magnitude.
Let's break it down.
So, the skeptics point out that the amount of exposure a person gets from environmental EDCs like trace phthalates in a body lotion or BPA from handling a recede is absolutely dwarfed by the massive intentional use of pharmaceutical hormones.
Oh, right, like birth control.
Exactly. Think about oral contraceptives or estrogen replacement therapies. Those deliver incredibly potent high doses of synthetic hormones, yet they are widely prescribed, heavily studied, and generally well tolerated by the endocrine system.
Plus, many of the studies showing extreme harm, like the rapid follicle death, those are based on high-dose exposures in animal models, not humans.
Right. The Healthline source brings that caveat up too.
Yeah. The human data at the typical low exposure levels you and I might get from just drinking out of a plastic water bottle is still evolving. So asking on behalf of the listener, what does this all mean? Should you be panicking and throwing out everything in your house, or is this just, scientific noise?
This raises an important question about how we interpret long-term toxicological data. It is absolutely true that a birth control pill delivers a vastly higher dose of synthetic hormone than a plastic food container.
Obviously.
But the critical difference lies in intent, duration, and predictability. Pharmaceutical hormones are intentionally potent. They're prescribed for specific durations, and the body can generally process and metabolize them in a predictable way.
They are controlled.
Exactly. EDCs, on the other hand, are unintentional, chronic, and cumulative.
It's like the difference between a controlled, intentional release of water from a dam versus a slow, hidden leak inside the walls of a house that just rots the foundation over 30 years.
That's a great way to look at it. The danger of environmental EDCs isn't necessarily a massive single dose that causes immediate failure. It is the lifelong, low-level cocktail of exposures.
Because it's never just one chemical.
Exactly. You aren't just exposed to one chemical in isolation. You are exposed to dozens of different compounds simultaneously every single day, starting from the embryonic stage in the womb.
Which is terrifying to think about.
It is. But that chronic low-level interference over decades is exactly what the newer human data, like the WashU and SWAN studies, is finally capturing.
Which leads us directly into how this chronic threat actually does its dirty work, and more importantly, how you can actively fight back.
Because understanding the physical mechanism of the cellular damage reveals the actionable solutions.
Yes. So according to the Frontiers research, the mechanism driving the destruction of the ovarian follicles comes down to two words: oxidative stress.
Let's unpack that term.
Okay, let's break down exactly how that happens. At a cellular level, your body has a built-in defense mechanism against oxidative stress. Think of it as a highly trained cellular hazardous materials team.
The hazmat team, I love that.
Right, and the acronyms in the literature for this team are SOD, CAT, and GPX.
And those stand for superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione peroxidase.
A mouthful for sure.
Very much so. But they are vital antioxidant enzymes. Their entire job is to patrol the cells, neutralize toxic free radicals, and clean up cellular waste before it can cause structural damage.
But the research shows that EDCs actively suppress this hazmat team. The chemicals bind to the cellular receptors that would normally signal the nucleus to produce these enzymes.
They're cutting off the supply.
Exactly. They effectively block the purchase orders for more hazmat workers. So because the hazmat team is understaffed, toxic free radicals build up inside the ovarian follicles.
And that buildup is dangerous.
Very. This massive accumulation of oxidative stress physically damages the cells and triggers apoptosis, which is the biological term for programmed cell death.
The cell becomes so toxic that it essentially condemns its own building and shuts down permanently.
It's tragic for the cell.
It is. And when this happens on a mass scale to the primordial follicles, you get that accelerated abrupt menopause we've been talking about.
But the most empowering aspect of all this data is that it gives you a playbook for defense.
We are not completely helpless here.
Right. We cannot control the entire global environment. You can't eliminate every single molecule of PFAS from the planet, but you absolutely can control your microenvironment.
Your home, your diet, your daily routines.
Exactly. By reducing unnecessary exposure and actively supporting your body's internal hazmat team, you can buffer your reproductive system.
So let's get into the highly practical mitigation strategies the sources provide.
A major recommendation from the clinical literature, like the life extension piece, is to absolutely avoid heating food in plastic containers.
This is a huge one. Yes, because heat degrades the plastic and releases those phthalates and BPAs directly into your food.
It's just a direct injection of EDCs, so instead you can opt for glass or ceramic storage and swap out scratched non-stick pans, which are a major source of forever chemicals, for cast iron or ceramic-coated cookware.
That's a really simple swap.
And water, too.
Mhm.
Invest in a high-quality water filter specifically rated to catch PFAS and PCBs.
The water filter is key.
And take a hard look at your personal care products. I mean, your skin is your largest organ, right?
Mm.
So choosing cosmetics, shampoos, and lotions clearly labeled as BPA and paraben-free makes a massive dent in your daily chemical burden.
And dietary interventions are just as critical as what you put on your skin.
Oh, definitely. Tell us about the diet side.
Well, the Frontiers paper highlighted that you can actively fight oxidative stress by bringing in outside reinforcements for your cellular hazmat team.
Calling in the reserve.
Exactly. Treating the body with dietary antioxidants, we're talking compounds like melatonin, curcumin from turmeric, resveratrol, quercetin, and vitamin E, actually improved ovarian function in the clinical models.
That is amazing.
It is. These antioxidants successfully reversed the oxidative stress, neutralized the free radicals, and actually protected those precious follicles from apoptosis.
So you really are not helpless in this. You can literally build a biochemical shield around your reproductive system based on what you eat and the products you choose to buy. Think of the EDCs as rust, slowly eating away at a car's engine, right?
Okay, yes.
And the antioxidants are the premium rust-proofing treatment that shields the machinery and keeps it running smoothly.
It really just requires a shift from passive acceptance of our modern environment to active, intentional management of our daily exposures.
So let's bring this all together. We started with the concept of a ticking biological clock and asked if our environment could tamper with it.
And the clinical and epidemiological answers are a resounding yes.
Yeah, they really are. Endocrine-disrupting chemicals are ubiquitous hackers that infiltrate the HPG axis. The human data shows they can accelerate the menopausal timeline by a couple of years, which strips away vital cardiovascular and neurological protections prematurely.
Furthermore, they make the transition incredibly harsh.
Right. Intensifying symptoms through sudden hormonal crashes and unchecked oxidative stress. But the silver lining is that simple, intentional lifestyle shifts like ditching heated plastics and loading up on powerful antioxidants can fortify your cellular defenses and protect your internal timeline.
Controlling what we can control is really the best defense we have.
It is. But before we wrap up today, I want to leave you with one final, totally mind-bending concept from the Frontier source that we haven't even touched on yet.
This part is wild.
It is. We have spent this entire deep dive talking about how your environment affects your menopause. But the research shows these chemicals have profound transgenerational effects.
Yeah, the timeline of human reproductive biology makes this incredibly profound.
It does.
Yeah.
Because a female fetus develops all the primordial follicles she will ever have while she is still developing inside her mother's womb.
Her entire lifetime supply of eggs is created before she takes her first breath.
Exactly. That means prenatal exposure to EDCs crosses the placenta and directly impacts the eggs of the fetus.
The implications of that are just staggering.
It means a pregnant woman's exposure to phthalates in her cosmetics or PFAS from her cookware today could actually physically alter the primordial follicles of her unborn daughter.
It's hard to wrap your head around.
It is. That pregnant woman's microenvironment right now could dictate the menopausal timeline and the cardiovascular health of her daughter 50 years in the future.
Wow.
It is a stunning reminder of our deep biological interconnectedness. The environment isn't just something outside of us, it passes through us, leaving fingerprints on the generations that follow. It's something to think about the next time you hold a plastic water bottle. The gears of that biological clock aren't just ticking for you, they are ticking for the future.